Hello and welcome to City Simply. These videos are really intended to be used with the free ebook on the website, which together provide the public with a free, easy access guide to change in the cities, to explain the characteristics that lead to not very nice places or lead to great places, and provide a toolkit to engage with good things and oppose bad things, and really provide knowledge and power, because people live in cities and need that power to engage with change. So where do we start? I brought you here to the Blackwall Tunnel, care of Doc Brown's time machine in the mid-1930s, which I struggled to get to 88 miles an hour in East London. And what I want you to look at there is that building, that arch-type building from the turn of the 19th century. It's quite attractive. I can wander around on foot, I could jump on that tram. It's quite a nice environment here. And buildings like that are often looked at as a mark of a great city. People focus on buildings and think great cities have lots of great buildings, and that's not necessarily the case. And to explain that, we're going to go to 2020, where we can see the same building is there. And frankly, it's not very nice, is it? We're now in the middle of an urban expressway. We've got 6 lanes of traffic trying to mow me down in street furniture. And what has changed is the way that that building relates to all the space around it. And the space around it is wholly different to what it was when you could wander around on foot and it was quite nice. And it's that relationship between the building and the space and the place which has changed and made it to be really a rather unpleasant environment. And to explain that a bit further, well, we're going to take a cue from a cooking show. So back to the studio. Welcome to the studio. Now I'm going to try and explain how cities work, how making pancakes. So I made 2 pancakes. The first, I've got all the ingredients. I've been put together exactly in the right order, perfectly measured, and we've made what look like quite nice pancakes. They're the ones I'm eating. And then in the second attempt, I have put all the same ingredients together, just not necessarily in the right order, and one extra ingredient, which is mainly to drink while we are waiting for them to cook. So we've got through most of that now. And the second pancake, well, putting the ingredients together not necessarily the right order has made the pancake, which, well, I'm not going to eat. Dan, you're having that one later. And we here have 2 different scenarios with exactly the same ingredients. We can have this in a city where we can have all of the different ingredients add up to something which is more than the sum of its parts, or is less than the sum of its parts, or the sum of its parts. And both have got eggs in. Eggs are beautiful pieces of engineering care of nature. And the city we can have exactly the same. We can have a great building, which is a great piece of design or a great piece of engineering, but it may fit in the city like that, whereas actually we want it to fit in the city like that. And I'm now going to make myself really, really unpopular with the architecture world by taking you to one of those. This is the Lloyd's building in the City of London. It is an egg. It's a great piece of engineering, but it fits in the city more like this. Now, when we look at the Lloyd's building, in pictures we see it from a distance, but actually we experience it on the street. So if we look at the camera now on the bike, we see we're approaching it, and as we approach it, all of the historic buildings facing the street front onto the street. The main entrance faces the street, but we get to the Lloyd's building and all we see is a tangled mass of forms. We see this tree sort of hidden, looking rather awkward there. We see a fire escape facing the main entrance. Well, let's carry on to facing the main street rather than the main entrance. There is no main entrance there. There should be a main entrance there. Well, let's carry on around to the side street. Well, here we do see a entrance. It's steps. We've got to cross a parking area to get to it. It's not great. And in fact, there's a little sign saying it's not the main entrance. The main reception's further along. Well, let's carry on to it. So we pass a bike area, a bit further down the street, further away from the main street, and we get a sign, look, reception, great, but we've got to go down some steps to get to it, turn right back on ourselves, we can't even see it. Well, if we have to sign where main reception is or main entrance to a building is, we've probably got something wrong, because that should be obvious. It should be on the main street. Well, let's carry on around to the back now. Well, we've got one thing right. What we've got here is the servicing entrance at the back. That's where the dump trucks go. You want to hide that away around the back. But we've got a cafe or restaurant, something next to it. Well, that's lovely to sit in and watch the dump trucks go in, isn't it? Well, great. This doesn't really fit into the city particularly well. It's an amazing piece of design, but at street level, it doesn't fit with the street. And that matters because in a city, we spend our time on the street. So I can explain that better a bit further with a model. So let's get rid of the cooking and clear the studio. So now I've made a model of a crossroads, or I suppose an intersection if you're from a former colony. And what we see here is we've got two roads that intersect at 90 degrees to one another, and we have all of the buildings exactly the same distance from the street, a bit like New York. And that impacts on how we feel the street. Now, we're looking at a plan here and people look at cities from up above, but actually we don't live there, we live down at the street. So Dan, let's get the camera down on the street and see that view. Well, we can see that the street looks dead straight, it looks quite dull, we can pretty much see forever. In fact, if I move this obelisk, we can see it miles away and we can barely even tell there's a junction on the street. But if we start to move the buildings around slightly, if we change the angle of that junction, we change the view down the street, and that actually makes it more interesting as a place. Similarly, if we push some of these buildings around as well, that also impacts on how we feel the street and how we perceive the space. And we suddenly have a much, much more interesting street. And that's because of the relationship between the buildings and the street. It's nothing to do with the architecture of the buildings. All these buildings are exactly the same, wooden, I suppose, for the purposes of this model, but now they are far more interesting because they relate to each other better. And it's that relationship that really matters in a city, not architecture. So that is the theme I'm going to carry on with and hopefully explain a bit better.